talked about this a lot in the past. We've gone over this before. One of my favorite things about Pokemon is how inclusive it is, how many different niches and how many different people can get involved. As long as you have a passion for Pokemon, as long as you enjoy the card game or the franchise, you belong here. Whether you're somebody who collects, you're a casual collector or a hardcore collector, whether you're a competitive player, a casual player, maybe somebody who just plays online or goes to leagues every once in a while. Maybe you're a business owner, you're just looking to make your way as an owner of a trading card store because that's something that's super passionate to you, that you're extremely passionate about. Or if you're somebody who is a Pokemon investor, somebody who is investing in Pokemon because you love Pokemon so much, whatever walk you are from, whatever person you are, you belong in this community. We all are tied together with this passion that drives us. As long as you continue to keep that passion, we're all connected. And I think that's what's so fantastic about this franchise and about this game, because it is that escape. It's just such a wonderful thing that hits so many of us and resonates so strongly with so many different people that it all connects us and we're all intertwined. And that's why I appreciate you guys so much, because we do share this passion together, and I think that's super important. And I want to talk to you guys. I really wish I could have recorded this video a couple years ago, but for some reason my brain didn't work and I couldn't figure out the information that I wanted to compile together in order to give you a good understanding for a lot of people who kind of came into the hobby a little late. Maybe you came into the hobby at 2019, 2020 when things really started getting out of control, and I really kind of wanted to emphasize things because we're going to talk about that investing aspect of things today. And there's a lot of negative connotations that go along with investing, because we think about 2019, 2020, when we had all these influencers kind of come into the hobby, like Logan Paul, like Logic, like all these different names, big names who had huge impacts that were kind of coming into the hobby right around a time when we had the pandemic shutting things down, when the government was literally printing money like crazy. People had access to a lot of funding that they could kind of throw at different things, and you have these influencers who are kind of telling you, hey, buy these Pokemon cards. Look, I bought this booster box, this first edition booster box for $500,000, and I'm selling all the packs inside for $10,000. I'm going to make $200,000 on this box. It's absolutely crazy. And you have this giant this money grab going on, this money grab where people are going nuts when you start thinking about Pokemon investing and the negativities that go alongside it. It's really greed. It's really greed that kind of paints a bad picture when it comes to Pokemon investing, and it doesn't have to. It really doesn't have to. When we talk about investing on this channel, we're not talking about investing money in the hopes that in 10, 15, 20 years we're going to get a giant return on it. We're talking about investing your dollars, your collection dollars, the budget that you have set aside for Pokemon cards at the best possible point, so that way you can maximize your collection goal. So if you're buying something at X price instead of Y price, that difference gives you that additional money, that additional funding, so that way you can buy more. That way you can spend more money. That way you can collect more. You don't want to be feeling like you're wasting money and throwing money away, because then this isn't going to be fun anymore. And the moment this stops becoming fun for you is the time that you need to take a step back. You need to either get out or take a step back and just start getting back to your basics, getting back to what brought you, what drove you into the community. Because if it is money, then you're probably not going to have a lot of fun, especially when it comes to modern Pokemon. And I'm going to talk about that during this kind of presentation that I put together, because modern Pokemon, the likelihood of putting something in a storage shed for 5-10 years and seeing an Evolving Skies booster box go from $100 to $10,000 is slightly ludicrous. If you're talking about in a 10-year span, it's probably not going to happen, and I'm going to explain why. But the mindset of investing and having this ideology of I'm going to 10, 15, 20x is really not what we're talking about when it comes to investing in Pokemon on this specific channel. And I really hate the fact that so many different content creators and so many different influential people kind of came into the hobby during the pandemic and really just kind of made these terrible ideas, encouraged these terrible ideas when it came to spending, because it really impacted a lot of people and negatively. And that's really what caused a lot of frustration, especially when it came to scalping, especially when it came to investing. Money's okay to think about. When it turns into greed, then it becomes a problem. So start thinking about expanding your collection. And if you want to associate investing with collecting instead, I think that's a really good way to kind of handle the situation. But don't think about 10, 20xing. Don't think about that portion of money. That was something that kind of happened when we had this giant crypto boom and everything that was going stonks with GameStop and AMC and all this nutty stuff going on because of all this money that was being printed and dispersed. It drove a really negative light into the community, and I think it's important to kind of take a step back from that, get away from that. Now that we're kind of healing a little bit, now that I've finally found some data that kind of explains what I'm talking about, I think it's really important. So when we talk about investing your collection dollars, I just pulled up a modern card right now that's doing extremely well. The reason Giratina V-Star is doing extremely well is because of a different area of the niche that you may not pay a whole lot of attention to, and that's the competitive card game. When Lost Origin originally came out, Giratina V-Star did really, really well. You can see it was selling for $22 a copy right after release of Lost Origin. Then it came down a little bit, and then as Giratina started falling out of favor in the format, we had the release of Silver Tempest. Lugia V-Star became the most dominant deck. Giratina V-Star pretty much stopped getting played altogether. Regigigas became a big thing again, and Lost Box became a big thing again. Vikavolt started making some noise. Duraludon continued to be really strong. Mew started to be very strong, and Giratina just didn't fit anymore. However, with rotation looming and coming at the end of March when we have the release of Scarlet and Violet, that's going to bring a whole new format to the competitive world, to the competitive industry. And you can see at one point in time, this Giratina V-Star dropped all the way down to $4.16. We want to start looking at trends. The reason we look at trends and pay attention to money is because that's the perfect time to buy. Somewhere around that area, that $4 to $5 area, it may not seem like $1 or $2 that you're saving on a card is a big deal, but when you start calculating in your budget, it can be a very, very big deal. And now look what's happening with Giratina V-Star already. As soon as people saw that things were starting to do extremely well in Japan, because Japan's format is in front of us. Remember, they have booster boxes that release far ahead of us. They already had Scarlet and Violet base drop. So we don't get Scarlet and Violet base dropping until the end of March. They already have that. So that format is already legal. And Giratina, with rotation, is starting to make a lot of noise. So Giratina is starting to get bought here so people can prepare decks for rotation when it hits, because we might start having League Cups happen again sometime in April. League Challenges happen again. Obviously, there's still regional events. There's international events. It's important to start having these cards as a competitive player, so that way you're not buying them at $22 a piece. But look what's happening. If we would have bought it at $4.16, that would have been the best point to buy it, because now it's not. Now it's all the way up to $9.28. Now it's basically doubled in price. It's gone up 100% over the span of a month. And I think it's important to kind of look at the trends and pay attention to what's going on in the hobby, so that way if you're not paying attention to everything else and you're only looking at a few things, you can go to this channel and you can say, hey, I should buy this Giratina V-Star. Danny said it's doing really well in Japan. I'd rather pay $5 for it. I need it for my master set. I don't want to pay $9 for it. And it could go back down. It could go back down to $4 or $5, especially once rotation happens again next year. And let's say Giratina V-Star rotates out of format, it could go back down to $4. But if you're budgeting yourself X amount of money, as we move on to the next slide here, if you're budgeting yourself X amount of dollars, the way to maximize your collection budget when it comes to spending is to make sure you're buying those cards at the lowest possible price you can. So if you're budgeting yourself for $2,400 a year on singles specifically, and that's about $200 a month that you're budgeting yourself a year, and that could be low, it could be high for you, but we're just using it as an example, and you're buying cards on average, the average single price that you're buying them at is $12, that means you're going to be able to purchase roughly 200 singles throughout your entire year. That's what you're budgeting yourself for. So you're collecting a binder worth of cards, and you put 200 cards in that binder this year because on average you spent $12 per single. Now, if you start paying attention to the market and start seeing what's going on, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, this one increased $1, this one decreased $1, now might be the time to buy it. If you're buying it at lower prices when it gets to its lowest, or when it gets to its basement, or when it gets close to that level, and your average single price that you're spending goes down, and you're spending on average $10 per single as opposed to $12 per single, all of a sudden that's 40 more cards. So if you're paying attention to the market and you're seeing what's happening in the market, even if it's just $1 or $2 here and there, if you're looking to buy a Radiant Charizard and you spend $7 on that Radiant Charizard from Crown Zenith instead of the $12, $13 that it was selling for, or even $8 that it was selling for, you're making a better decision, and you're spending that dollar goes back into your collection budget, which helps you lower that average price per single and then buy more singles. So you're spending a little bit less and you're getting 40 more cards to kind of add to your collection budget. That's 20% of an increase in your card collection just because you paid attention to the market a little bit. And that's what's important about investing your dollars into your Pokemon collection. That's what's that's called being making smart decisions, making the best buying decisions that you possibly can. And that's why it's important to constantly look at that kind of stuff and not necessarily associate the money with the greed aspect of it, but associate the money with making the best decisions when it comes to spending your collection dollars. There's a lot of thoughts that go into investing in Pokemon, and it's extremely important to understand where Pokemon started to where it is now. And what we went through in 2019, 2020, 2021, it took a pandemic to make that happen. It took the government printing a ton of additional funds. It took people staying home all the time in order for these cards, these sealed products, to just start booming in price. And I really wanted to start paying attention and show off some of the graphics that showcase how did everything do leading up to the pandemic, because that's really what you can expect out of your collection. Those are really the thoughts that you can, the increases that you can expect out of your collection. And it's way, way less than what a lot of those influencers and content creators were kind of preaching during the pandemic. Yeah, at one point in time during the pandemic, a base booster box went from $14,000 to $28,000 basically overnight. If you would have bought one base booster box that was sealed and then you sold it a week later, you would have made $14,000. That's insane. That's nuts. But it took a pandemic, it took an over surplus of money being printed and distributed, and it took influencers with millions of followers bringing a bunch of people into the hobby who don't necessarily pay attention to it and are only in it for that greed aspect. That's what it took. People got burned. People lost a lot of money because they weren't paying attention to the dash that happens from the beginning of a release until that boom that we saw. So if we look, and this Amazon only unfortunately keeps track of everything up to a certain point because Amazon hasn't been around forever, but it gives you a rough idea, an understanding of the increase that this base set Charizard went through on Amazon price flow. And while I don't necessarily think Amazon is going to be the perfect indicator, it does give you a good idea of sales that happened on Amazon for some of these specific products. Like if you look at this base set Charizard right here, and you can see in May of 2010, this card is selling for around $10 to $15. Well, this card came out 11 years prior. This card came out in 1999. So it took 11 years for this card to only be at roughly $10, $15. And if you look and continue to track on the bottom of the graph here where it continued to go all the way up until 2018, when it finally crossed that $90 threshold, I mean, you're looking at a substantial amount of time after release for this card to get to this level. Now, Pokemon is very cyclical, and it's going to go through waves of popularity. Right now, we are still really, really high. It is going to come down in popularity, and then it's going to come back up again. That's how it goes. I don't think we'll ever get to the attention point that we were at during the pandemic, but it is going to go in waves. So throughout 1999 up until that point of 2018, you had a lot of people enter and exit the hobby all the time. That's why a lot of people who have been around for a long time tell you just don't leave. Just stay entranced in the community. Even if you need to take a step back from collecting cards and purchasing cards, you can still pay attention to what's going on in the market, so that way you continue to learn and grow. But maybe you don't spend as much money and you just pay attention because you do like the hobby. But once you exit the hobby and once you take breaks for 3-4 years at a time, it's a lot harder to get back into it and start understanding everything that went on during that time that you were missing, because there are waves of popularity when it comes to Pokemon, whether it be the competitive side, whether it be the VGC side, whether it be Pokemon Go. All those different things are going to play an impact on Pokemon prices. But the important thing to look at is look at how slow this card trended. We talk about natural and organic growth. That's what this card went through for 20 years up until 2019, when all of a sudden, boom, it started taking off. and got up to a point where Amazon was listing these cards. People were listing these cards on Amazon up to $750. Now, not necessarily selling them for that price. They're probably selling them much closer to this $375, $400, depending on condition of this card. But if you look at where it was for a long time, I remember buying Charizard, base set Charizards for $20, $30 back in 2015, 2016, because that was the going rate for this card. And that was 15, 16 years after the release of this single. So if you start translating that to modern cards, where there's probably a lot more near mint condition of these in existence than there was from Charizard, because people didn't take as well of care of these cards back then, it really goes to show you how things can actually be expected when it comes to growth. The same thing can be said for base set Blastoise. Obviously, it went through a lot more ups and downs here, a lot more peaks and valleys, but pretty much the same thing. In July of 2011, it was only a $2, $3, $4, $5 card, and really slow organic growth all the way up to $30 that it was selling for in 2019. So 21 years after release, 20 years after release, this card was only selling for about $30, and look how high it ballooned. It ballooned all the way up to $250, $300 at one point during that pandemic, before now coming back down. And yeah, the market probably corrected itself at some point, but a lot of that is because there was so much popularity and attention being paid to Pokemon. So do I think that these cards are going to come back down to that $30 mark? No, absolutely not. A new market has been set because the market adapted and it corrected itself to this point. However, slow organic growth led to that correction, and starting to pay attention to, okay, should I really expect it to get up to, should I really expect this Rayquaza to get up to Rayquaza VMAX alternate art from Evolving Skies? Should I really expect that to be up to $1,000 in the next 2-3 years? Not necessarily, because if we look at the history of a lot of these cards, it's very slow, very natural growth, not necessarily seeing this giant increase like what we saw in 2019, 2020, and 2021. If we look at base 2 booster packs, some sealed items that I put on here, look at this base 2 booster pack featuring Mewtwo. In 2013, it was selling for about $8, $9. You're looking at a 230% increase from the years 2013 to 2019, when things really started taking off. So this set released in 2000, 2001, somewhere around that area, and it continued to stay relatively low. You're looking at only $9, $10 what this is selling for in 2013 and 2014, before it really started gaining a little bit. There's nothing wrong with the 230% increase. That's a fantastic increase when you're talking about an investing side of things. But the idea of holding something for 5 years and then it going up to $200, a single booster pack from Evolving Skies, is a little bit ludicrous when you consider looking at some of these packs from that released in the early 2000s or even the 2010s. The likelihood of it moving up thousands of percentage points just seems very unlikely. If you look all the way up until 2018, 2019, this booster pack sealed was only selling for about $40 a piece. And then it hit 2020 and things really ballooned, where it went from basically $57 in the span of a couple months all the way up to that $200 price point. Same thing with Fossil. We saw Fossil really, really slow moving. I remember finding these on Target shelves for years in existence, where you could buy loose boosters. They would be in like a $3 bin or something like that for a very long time after Fossil released. Another set that released in 1999, 2000, and continued selling for $2, $3 a pop all the way up until 2011, 2012, where finally it started growing very, very slowly. And you can see even in April of 2015, still only selling for about $10 there. And then in August of 2018, it's still right around $40. Finally, when you hit late end of 2019, early end of 2020, when we're starting to talk about this pandemic boom, that's when it really started skyrocketing in price, basically going from about $50 per booster pack all the way up to $200, $300 per booster pack. 1,900% of an increase from 2013 to 2019 for a base set booster pack. And now it's important to remember that these are listed prices on Amazon, so not necessarily sold prices, because $1,000 for a booster pack of base set, no, nobody's paying that right now. A lot of people are paying anywhere between $300, $400, but definitely not that $999 price point. But if you you look, the important thing to look at here is third-party new is selling in 2009 for $2 a pop. So these were very, very cheap still 10 years after release, because there was so many that were printed. People fell out of favor with Pokemon. They weren't as interested in it anymore. And a lot of people had a lot of these excess products that they were kind of selling for $2, $3, $4, $5 a piece. And look at where it's selling in 2011. Look where it's selling in 2013, where it's finally past that $5 mark. In 2015, it's past that $10 mark, all the way up until 2019, when it's only selling for about $100, and then booming in 2020, where these sealed packs are selling for $400 plus. Elite Trainer boxes, another thing that's exploded in price throughout the years. These have always retailed for $40 up until this MSRP increase that we're coming into now, because these weren't starting to be printed until Phantom Forces, until later on in the XY era. So in 2014, not too long after Phantom Forces, 2014, right around the time when Phantom Forces came out, end of 2014, right when this released, this was selling for basically wholesale, just better than wholesale, much like what you see now in the current ETB market with Brilliant Stars, Astral Radiance, because they were overproduced and a lot of people weren't necessarily interested in keeping them. And look at how slowly this is growing. Up until 2018, it's continuing to sell for right around $50, $60 up until 2020, when finally it's starting to take off because a lot more attention is being paid to it. A lot of supply is much, much lower, and the market corrected itself like crazy, and people were like, oh, I want to collect sealed ETBs, and then all of a sudden you see this giant increase in price up to $3,000, but still increased 300% from when it was released up until 2019, when it got to roughly $100 per ETB. It just wasn't this huge boom that we see now and expect to see in 5-10 years from a set like Evolving Skies. The Shining Legends Super Premium Ho-Oh Collection Box, this was something that sold for under MSRP for a very long time. They were on clearance shelves at Target right around Black Friday because people weren't interested in spending anywhere near that price point for a set like Shining Legends. There were collectors who were interested in it, but a lot of competitive players didn't play a whole lot of cards from this set, and the sets that really, and the cards that mattered, they just bought the singles for. So you can see selling in 2017 on Amazon for $50. That's $30 under MSRP for this product, and continuing to sell at that price point for a couple years after release, all the way up until 2018, when Amazon finally ran out of supply of this product, and then slowly started to gain some ground up to $140 at the beginning of 2020, and then boom, blew up like crazy all the way up to $700-800 a pop in 2021. Now it's come back a little bit, sitting right around that $600 mark. But look at how slow the growth was for a long time and what it took to increase this like crazy. If we look at the Generations Elite Trainer Box, this was another item that was sitting on shelves, clearance shelves at Target for a very long time, selling from right around $42, $10 below MSRP directly from Amazon around release 2016, and selling for $60 in 2018 directly by Amazon. So a couple years that it took to start moving these. This is another item, like I said, that was found during Black Friday sales for much, much cheaper because they just weren't moving. And then look what happened. In 2020, it ballooned like crazy, went all the way up to over $700 per Elite Trainer Box after we saw a 100% increase from 2017 to 2019. Basically overnight, it blew up 800%, and now it's settled back a little bit right around that $600 mark, $550 mark. But the expected growth is actually natural right here, and it took a giant pandemic amongst a lot of other things to really balloon the price point. This is an Evolutions card, Charizard right here, the holographic card. I remember buying these for $10, $12 a pop in 2016, 2017 because there just wasn't the demand for them. Fairly easy to pull, being just a holographic card. And look at how slow and natural the growth was for the first 4 years of the release of Evolutions. It took until 2020 where prices really started going crazy, and look how high they got, ridiculously high. You're talking about $175, $180 because a lot of content creators were really pushing Evolutions, and a lot of people, pack breakers and things like that, were really talking about Evolutions, even though Evolutions was really not a desired set at all after release. People thought it would be cool to open up a few packs to get that nostalgic feeling, but there wasn't a whole lot of competitive connotations attached with this set. People just weren't interested in it, and because of that, it was included in a bunch of tins, it was thrown in a bunch of collection boxes, and people would look at it and they'd be like, I'm not even going to open this Evolutions pack because there's nothing that I need inside it. I don't even care if I pull the Charizard because I have 10 of them already. And then it ballooned in price, went way, way up. Now it's settled back down a little bit, but still way higher than what it was. This is the most important example that I can really give is the XY base booster box. As you can see, in 2014 when it released, you could find new boxes for $80. Booster boxes had no margins for a very long time. Nobody really was cracking packs. They were basically just buying singles. Pull rates were terrible. You would get 4 to 5 hits per booster box as opposed to the 15 hits that we're getting today. It was bad. It took a very long time to move booster boxes. When you moved them, you might get $1 or $2 profit per booster box once you factor in shipping and things like that. A lot of storefronts lost money on booster boxes, couldn't survive selling sealed vintage or sealed products, so they stopped selling Pokemon cards altogether. That's why we ran into such an issue with allocations. A lot of storefronts specialized in Magic and specialized in Yu-Gi-Oh! Because they could actually move those products. Pokemon products wouldn't move. Sealed products wouldn't sell. You could sell some booster packs here and there, but booster boxes just wouldn't move, and that's very evident from what we're seeing with this XY base booster box here, which in 2014 was selling for around $80 and continued selling for around $80 all the way up until 2018, where it finally gained a little bit of ground and got closer to that MSRP point, probably passing $100, $110, $120, but all the way up until 2020. So you're looking at 6 years after release where it finally crossed that $200 threshold, and then the pandemic hit and it ballooned all the way up to $2,000. So if you're starting to look at where your Evolving Skies booster box might be 6-7 years down the road, I mean, we've made it almost 2 years into release. We're a year and a half into the release of Evolving Skies, and the price point of it is extremely high, over $300. Obviously, the demand for a set like Evolving Skies much, much greater, but looking at something like XY base and how long it took just to get even close to that MSRP level should give you a good indicator of what to actually expect from your Evolving Skies booster box in 5-10 years, where you might see it might level off around $500. The idea that in 10 years that this Evolving Skies booster box is going to be over $10,000, I just don't think that's going to happen. It could, and I could be very, very wrong, but sealed collecting right now is way bigger than it's ever been in Pokemon before. The amount of people who say that they're throwing cases into a storage unit for 5-10 years down the road, the way that's going to impact the market is a lot of people are going to find a price point where they're like, okay, I'm good at selling this. I'm good at selling this at this price, get my margin, get out and put that money into something else. That's going to come very soon with a set like Evolving Skies because it has tripled in price. If a lot of people bought cases at $100 per box, $600 per case after that first print or that third print wave, put it in storage sheds, and then you're just looking at all of a sudden these cases are selling for $2,000-$3,000 per case, people are going to look at that margin and be like, okay, I'm good at selling it at this price. I'm not going to wait 10 years down the road for this to kind of mature even more, because honestly, with the amount of people collecting sealed right now as opposed to how many people were collecting it back in the early 2000s or even the early 2010s, way outnumbers today way outnumbers what it was back then. And a lot of people, that's going to impact the prices, because as people start being okay with that profit margin, they're going to start moving cases. That's going to cause the price to come down a little bit. People are going to panic. They're going to move their cases, causing the price to kind of come down a little bit more and level out. You might see Evolving Skies hit $500 a booster box if we don't see a reprint, but I really think it's going to stay at that $500 price point for quite some time. Look at what we saw with Evolutions. Evolutions continued to climb and climb and climb and climb, got to about $800, $900 per booster box, and then it settled back down around that $700 mark as people started selling them off, and it's been at that point now for over a year. We're probably going to see that exact same thing happen with Evolving Skies. I just wanted to give you guys a good understanding of what to expect from the market and why it's important to pay attention to price points but not get lost in the financial aspect of things, because when you start paying too much attention to investing and trying to make money off of Pokemon, you're not going to have a good time, and that's not fun for anybody. So collect what you like, invest in what you like, enjoy the game, and pay attention to the hobby. That's what's going to make you, that's what's going to give you the most. That's what's going to get the most out of it. But don't look at making 10, 20x, because that's really just not going to happen. That's not what Pokemon is for you. And that's my opinion. Pay attention to investing or spending your collection dollars. If you want to call it collecting, that might be a better word associated with it.
buying cards at their lowest price point. So that way you can expand your collection goals. That way you can buy more cards to kind of fill out your binder and have a little bit more money to invest in this great hobby that we all care so much about. So buy what you like, invest in what you enjoy, and enjoy the hobby, and that's what's most important. I hope you guys like the content. If you do, please leave a like down below, leave a comment. It goes a long way for the algorithm. Share the channel. I really appreciate it. Most importantly, if you could hit that subscribe button, it would mean the world to me. Thank you so much for everything, guys. I will talk to you soon. Until then, peace.